What's going on, everyone? So, Scream 7. We have Stu Macher, Roman Bridger, as well as several other characters that are perceived to be dead. Right? Obviously, in the case of Stu, a lot of people think he's still alive. But whatever ends up happening, whatever approach they end up going, there are a lot of questions about, do we get some type of flashback? Right? And doing live streams and stuff like that, people throw out ideas and stuff on like what the live stream can be. And, and I've really kind of thought about, okay, if we do get some type of flashback, one, I don't want a bunch of I don't want it to start getting convoluted and crazy, but I don't mind having a type of flashback that reveals new information. Right. And you can have multiple flashbacks throughout the movie that are all just kind of telling one story. I just don't want here's a flashback about Marine. Here's a flashback about Roman. Here's a flashback about what, right? When it starts getting crazy and all over the place. Right. But I wouldn't mind something where if you're going to have this kind of full circle tie-in, this full circle kind of connection, you're going to link this to the original, right? Like as you saw with Roman and Billy and Stu, and you had that all tie in. Now, obviously, they didn't do a flashback. They just kind of explained it through story. But if you were to do a type of flashback, I've seen people throw out, the most common one that I see is people will mention Marine. Doing something where you do a flashback to Marine Prescott. And look, I would love to see Marine in the franchise again, but personally, I don't think that that's the best route or approach, right? What new information are you going to give us about the Marine killing that we don't already know or that would really tie into things, right? I think if you're going to do some type of flashback that's going to tie into Sidney Prescott, that's going to tie into kind of all of the history and stuff like that. I think it would make the most sense, especially if even Stu is alive or whatever. I think the best approach to go about it would be to give us new information in regards to Roman and Stu, if Stu is alive, or Roman, Stu, and Billy, right? Billy and Stu. Roman contacted Billy, right? To basically say hey, your father's in my movies. We all know the story, right? Scream 3. And you had that connection. And Roman was able to convince Billy to pick up the knife, wear the Ghostface moniker, go get a patsy, go get a fall guy in Stu Macher that, ended up so that way you have somebody to throw under the bus, essentially, right? So that was the whole thing. I would love, if we're going to have some type of connection or something, more information and details on that, right? Maybe the aftermath, if you want to incorporate Marine or whatever, right? Maybe have something as the aftermath. So they kill Marine and then maybe they go to Roman after and explain to Roman what happened and what they did and how they, set up Cotton and all this stuff, right? And then Roman goes, do you really want to stop here type thing? Maybe Roman is the one that kind of launched everything. Or let's go under the kind of Stu Macher is alive thing. Now, I know I talk a lot about Stu being alive recently for somebody that doesn't want Stu to be alive, but I do think if you were ever going to do it, this is probably the chance to do it. Plus, been a lot of details about Stu. Even if Stu's not alive, I do think that this is going to be a very Stu-centered film, right? Whether it's Leslie Macher or whatever, I do think Stu is going to have some type of connection. So let's go under the assumption that Stu really is alive, right? If you were going to have evidence, if you were going to do a flashback, it would make sense to do a flashback that explains Stu being alive and maybe even a tie-in and connection to Roman, right? Maybe Roman discovered Stu was alive and helped him fake his death and housed him or something like that, right? Or, was able to kind of oh, Billy, because look, Stu said himself, why'd you do this? Peer pressure, right? Maybe, Roman was able, hey, Billy was going to throw you under the bus at some point. That's why he stabbed you and all that stuff. I'm feeling a little woozy here type thing, right? And kind of manipulates and plays into Stu Macher. And then Roman, because look, even Scream 3 doesn't make sense unless there's another killer, right? What if they make tie-in and connection that Stu and Roman were actually in cahoots in Scream 3, but Roman didn't want Stu to reveal because, if he failed or if something fell through or something you need somebody that can continue the work, continue the legacy, right? The problem is just, there's so much information with Stu Macher returning if he was to return. The problem is, like, how do you explain everything that you need to explain in a short film while developing characters and telling story and having Ghostface and all this other stuff, right? Like, so to me, that's why I've talked about, if you are going to do the Stu route, if you are going to, confirm Stu is alive, I think it would make sense to lay the groundwork and foundation of this in this Scream movie to basically clue in audiences and whatnot that, like, hey, Stu is alive. Here's how this happened. Blah, 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 blah. Right. And not necessarily have Stu be the main Ghostface in this film, but rather kind of carry into Scream 8. So this film kind of sets up and establishes through flashbacks and dialogue and all these other things that, hey, Stu is actually indeed alive, but, you kind of don't really get Stu as a character until Scream 8. Maybe just like a little appearance or something like that, a cliffhanger type thing at the end, whatever, right? That is something that I would like to see, where you have this connection with Roman and Stu Macher, have that tie-in with Billy Loomis. Maybe you even have something, like I said, I don't mind if you have multiple flashbacks, as long as it's one, if it's essentially one flashback that you keep kind of going back to, and it keeps giving you information so it's easy to kind of follow along, to where, maybe you have the initial Roman meeting Billy and Stu type thing and convincing them on the Ghostface moniker and taking people out. And then you have, say, the, the aftermath with Billy and him falling through and Stu surviving, and maybe Roman helps Stu fake his death because he is a filmmaker, right? I mean, he faked his own death, right? So maybe he does something and has evidence so people think he's dead. Because you also have to explain, why does the FBI think that he's dead? Like, if anyone would, if he was in a psych ward or something like that, or in a coma somewhere or whatever, right? The FBI wouldn't think he's dead. The FBI would know that, right? So you have to explain why the FBI believes he's dead and why he returned. So if you were to do something like that, the other route in general is just like, you don't have Stu Macher return, and you don't have him actually be in this film, and you just have a flashback that ties into maybe this new killer, right? Maybe you find out, like, if it's Leslie Macher, right? Maybe you get some information on kind of Stu, and maybe Leslie knew all along and just never did anything about it and just kind of left it alone. And, and then Vince was the thing that put it over the top, right? Maybe you have a scene where Leslie stumbles into Stu and Roman talking, like Stu, Billy, and Roman talking, and she overhears something, right? Like, give us new information or new details that we didn't have previously that now kind of clue us in and fill us in overall on said character. That is something that I think could make a lot of sense and really kind of tie in and make the connection into this film enough to where, okay, now it's kind of justified. Because if you just have like flashbacks just for the sake of having flashbacks, like, that's kind of silly in my opinion. There has to be purpose. I want to see purpose. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, what are you doing? Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.